Imagine waking up to find your property violated, not by a stranger, but by the very people who are supposed to protect your neighborhood. One morning, a homeowner discovered the padlock on their gate cut clean through, their Jeep gone without a trace. At first, it looked like a theft. But then the truth came out. It wasn't a thief at all. It was the HOA president, desperate to flex her power. What she didn't know was that this Jeep wasn't just any vehicle. It belonged to something much bigger, something that would turn the entire community against her. How far can an HOA go before they finally destroy themselves? At first, life in the neighborhood seemed almost picture-perfect. Quiet streets lined with manicured lawns, kids riding their bikes after school, neighbors waving politely as they watered their gardens. It was the kind of community people dreamed about when they imagined peaceful suburban living. For the homeowner, it felt like a fresh start. After years of hard work, saving, and sacrifice, finally owning a home here was a milestone. The Jeep sitting proudly in the driveway wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of freedom, independence, and countless memories of road trips, late-night drives, and family adventures. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. At first, the HOA seemed harmless enough. A newsletter here, a friendly reminder there, the usual talk about keeping hedges trimmed and mailboxes freshly painted. Nothing out of the ordinary. But beneath that polished image, the board had a reputation. Whispers spread about how far they were willing to go to enforce their rules. Stories of fines for the wrong shade of blinds, warnings about garden gnomes, even threats over the color of seasonal wreaths. Still, the homeowner brushed it off. After all, rules were rules, and as long as you played by them, there was nothing to worry about. Right? But then came the subtle signs. A note slipped under the door about parking compliance. A stern-looking board member slowing their walk whenever they passed by the Jeep. Neighbors casually warning, "Watch out, they've been targeting vehicles lately." What started as a quiet, comfortable home was about to become the center of a storm, one that no one in the neighborhood could have predicted. At first, the warning seemed almost laughable. The homeowner couldn't understand why a vehicle parked neatly in their own driveway was suddenly a problem. The Jeep wasn't blocking the sidewalk. It wasn't leaking oil. It wasn't abandoned. It was just there. But the HOA saw it differently. They called it an unsightly disruption to community aesthetics. The first letter was worded politely enough, a gentle reminder tucked into the mailbox. But within weeks, the tone shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't a reminder. It was a violation notice. A fine for failure to comply with parking guidelines. The homeowners stood in disbelief, holding the paper in their hand. Parking guidelines? Nowhere in the contract had they seen anything about personal vehicles and driveways being banned. And yet, here it was. A rule the HOA insisted had always been in effect. Neighbors began to whisper. Some shrugged and said, "It's not worth fighting them." Others admitted they'd faced similar fines, small infractions blown out of proportion until the penalties stacked higher and higher. One family had been fined for leaving their garbage can at the curb 5 minutes too long. Another was warned for planting unapproved flowers in their garden. The Jeep became the newest target, and the homeowner quickly realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. The letters escalated. One came every week, each one carrying a sharper threat. Failure to remove the vehicle will result in further action. Non-compliance may lead to legal involvement. Final warning. The homeowner tried reasoning with them. Emails, phone calls, even attending a board meeting to ask calmly and respectfully why the Jeep was such an issue. But the board members stared back with cold, rehearsed expressions. Their answer never changed. It violates community standards. Each day felt heavier. Every walk to the mailbox carried a pit in the stomach. Every glance toward the Jeep sparked a question. How much longer before they tried something worse? And then, it started. One evening, the homeowner came home from work to find a bright orange sticker slapped across the Jeep's windshield. Illegally parked. Remove immediately. Illegally? On their own property. The sticker was thick, sticky, almost impossible to peel off without leaving residue. It felt less like a warning and more like a deliberate act of humiliation, a scarlet letter for the entire neighborhood to see. The homeowner's frustration turned to determination. They weren't going to let the HOA bully them into submission. They began documenting everything. Every letter, every notice, every sticker, photos with timestamps, copies of the community bylaws, conversations recorded where possible. But as the evidence piled up, so did the harassment. One night, faint scratches appeared along the Jeep's side, like someone had run a key across the paint. A week later, a neighbor quietly admitted they'd seen the HOA president standing by the Jeep, flashlight in hand, inspecting it. Another time, the homeowner caught a board member lingering by their driveway at dawn, jotting something down on a clipboard. It was no longer about rules. It was intimidation. The HOA started sending fines for unrelated infractions. A patch of grass that looked too dry. A recycling bin not aligned properly with the curb. Even the shade of the porch light was called non-compliant. Each fine added to the mounting stress, each accusation designed to push the homeowner closer to surrender. But still, they refused to back down. The breaking point came on a quiet Saturday morning. The homeowner stepped outside, coffee in hand, and froze. The lock on the gate had been cut clean through, the chain hung loose, severed by heavy bolt cutters, and the Jeep gone. For a few seconds, panic set in. A stolen vehicle, a violation of property, a nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. But then reality twisted into something far more sinister. It wasn't thieves. It wasn't random. It was the HOA. A neighbor across the street had seen it happen. They came early, she whispered later. The president herself brought two men with her. They rolled the Jeep out and had it towed away. I didn't dare say anything. But I saw everything. The homeowner's pulse raced. Anger burned. Fear mixed with disbelief. How could they? How could an HOA, a group of neighbors with clipboards, just break into private property and take a vehicle? It wasn't just overreach. It was trespassing. It was theft. But here's the part the HOA didn't know. The twist that would turn this entire power play against them. This Jeep wasn't just a personal vehicle. It belonged to a police task force. What the HOA thought was a simple intimidation tactic was about to spiral into something far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more public than they could have ever imagined. The homeowner grabbed their phone, heart pounding, fingers trembling, and dialed the number no HOA president ever expected to be called. And as that call connected, the quiet neighborhood that once prided itself on its order and community standards was about to face a storm that would change everything. The moment the police task force got the call, the entire situation shifted. What the HOA president had thought was a simple act of intimidation was, in reality, a crime against law enforcement property. The Jeep wasn't just a car, it was part of an active undercover operation. Every sticker, every scratch, every humiliating fine the HOA had thrown at the homeowner now paled in comparison to what they had just unleashed. Within hours, uniformed officers and plainclothes agents descended on the neighborhood. Sirens cut through the quiet suburban streets, lights flashed against the manicured lawns, and curious neighbors peeked through blinds as the storm landed right on the HOA president's doorstep. The same president who had walked these streets with smug authority, clipboard in hand, was now surrounded, cornered by a level of power far beyond her control. Continues full climax section here with no cuts until resolution begins. The Jeep, towed away under false pretenses, was returned, escorted by law enforcement vehicles, shining under the glow of floodlights. It was rolled back into the driveway as if reclaiming its rightful place, no longer a target, but a symbol of resilience. The cut chain was replaced with a stronger lock, a visible reminder that no one would trespass again. The neighborhood didn't feel the same the morning after the arrest. It was quieter, almost fragile, as if the walls that had once held the community together had been stripped away, leaving everyone exposed to the truth. For years, people had lived under the shadow of rules and fines, never daring to question the HOA president's authority. But now, with flashing lights still burned into their memory, and the sight of her being led away in handcuffs still fresh in their minds, there was no going back. And for the homeowner, the journey left them with a lesson too powerful to ignore. Sometimes the fight isn't just about one home, one vehicle, or one person. Sometimes it's about showing everyone that fear can be defeated, that power can.